The piercing shriek of Zachariah Rowley's fury cut through the howling blizzard as he dragged his wife Zara toward the cabin door. Her pleas for mercy lost in the roar of the winter storm that had descended upon the Colorado mountains without warning in January of 1878. The small mining settlement of Bonanza, nestled in the rugged terrain of Saguache County, had seen its share of harsh winters, but none so bitter as this one nor as cruel as what was about to transpire in the Rowley household. "I've had enough of your defiance." Zachariah's face contorted with rage as he gripped Zara's arm, his knuckles white against her pale skin. His other hand clutched an empty whiskey bottle, the latest of many he'd drained over the past 3 days while the storm raged outside. "You think you can shame me in front of the whole town? Tell everyone I can't provide, that I'm nothing but a failure." "Zachariah, please," Zara begged, her chestnut hair falling loose from its pins as she struggled. "I never said such things. I only asked Mrs. Peterson if she needed help with mending to earn a few extra coins. He spat the word like venom. "As if my mining work isn't enough. As if I haven't broken my back for 3 years in that God-forsaken hole while you sit in comfort." Zara's eyes widened with disbelief. "Comfort? Our roof leaks, we haven't had meat in weeks, and you spend what little we have on whiskey." The back of Zachariah's hand connected with her cheek before she could finish. The force sent Zara stumbling against the rough-hewn table, knocking over the oil lamp. It clattered but didn't break, throwing wild shadows across the cabin's sparse interior. "You ungrateful woman," he growled, grabbing her by the shoulders. "I should never have married you. Your father was right, you're nothing but trouble and expense." Tears streamed down Zara's face, mixing with the trickle of blood from her split lip. 3 years of marriage had taught her that Zachariah's rage, once ignited by liquor, wouldn't be extinguished by reason or pleading. But never had she seen such cold hatred in his eyes before. "If my provisions aren't good enough for you," he snarled, dragging her toward the door, "then perhaps you should go find someone else to provide for you." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Zachariah, no, the storm you can't mean to, but he did." With a strength born of fury and whiskey, he threw open the cabin door. The wind howled in, bringing with it a blast of snow and ice that stole Zara's breath. Before she could regain her footing, Zachariah shoved her through the doorway, sending her sprawling into the knee-deep snow. "Go on, then," he shouted over the wind. "Go find someone who meets your standards. I'm done with you." Zara scrambled to her feet, the biting cold already penetrating her thin cotton dress. "Please, I'll die out here," she cried, lunging for the door, but Zachariah slammed it shut. The sound of the bolt sliding into place was like a death knell. "Zachariah," she screamed, pounding her fists against the wooden door until her knuckles bled. "Please, I'm sorry," but her cries went unanswered. The wind tore at her clothing, and the snow, falling so thick, it obscured everything beyond a few feet, quickly covered her shoes and ankles. Zara wrapped her arms around herself, shivering violently. The Rowley cabin sat on the outskirts of Bonanza, a good half-mile from the nearest neighbor. In fair weather, the walk would be nothing. In this blizzard, it might as well be 100 miles. Still, she had no choice. Stay here and she would freeze to death before morning. Gathering what little strength she had, Zara turned away from the cabin and began trudging through the snow, heading in what she hoped was the direction of town. The wind pushed against her, sometimes so forcefully that she staggered backward. The cold bit at her exposed skin, and within minutes, she could no longer feel her fingers or toes. Time lost meaning as Zara struggled forward. Had she been walking for minutes or hours? The snow was up to her thighs now, each step requiring all her strength. Her teeth had stopped chattering, a bad sign, she knew. The numbing cold was seeping into her core. A particularly violent gust knocked her sideways, and Zara fell heavily into the snow. Getting up seemed impossible, her limbs leaden and unresponsive. Perhaps resting for just a moment wouldn't hurt. As her eyelids grew heavy, a pinprick of light appeared in the swirling white. A lantern. Zara blinked, trying to clear her vision. Yes, a light, bobbing in the distance. With a renewed surge of desperate hope, she pushed herself up and staggered toward it. The light grew larger, and behind it, the vague outline of a structure emerged from the white void. Not the town, but a cabin larger than the one she shared with Zachariah, with a covered porch and what appeared to be a barn or stable attached. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. "Help!" Zara tried to call, but her voice was a hoarse whisper that couldn't carry over the storm. She pushed forward, each step slower than the last, until finally she reached what must be the front steps. Her numb feet stumbled, and she collapsed against the door, her frozen hand barely able to form a fist to knock. The last of her strength went into 3 weak thumps against the solid wood before darkness claimed her. Owen Everett had just stoked the fire when he heard a sound so faint he might have mistaken it for the wind rattling the shutters. He paused, head cocked, listening. There it was again, a dull thud against his front door. Who in their right mind would be out in this? He muttered, setting down the poker and crossing to the door. The blizzard had been raging for 2 days straight, the worst he'd seen in his 7 years in Colorado. Even the most hardened travelers would seek shelter before venturing out in such conditions. Owen lifted the latch and pulled the door inward, only to be met with resistance. Frowning, he put his shoulder into it and pushed harder. The door moved slightly, enough for him to see what blocked it, a human form, covered in snow, crumpled on his doorstep. "Good Lord!" he exclaimed, immediately dropping to his knees beside the figure. Brushing away the snow revealed a woman, her lips blue, her skin pale as the snow that coated her. She wore only a simple dress, no coat, no bonnet, no gloves, nothing that would protect against the deadly cold. Without hesitation, Owen scooped her into his arms, alarmed at how light she felt, how cold. He kicked the door shut behind him and carried her to the hearth, laying her gently on the bearskin rug before the roaring fire. "Miss, Madam, can you hear me?" he called, patting her cheek lightly. No response. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse weak under his fingertips. Hypothermia, he recognized, having seen it before in his army days. She needed warmth, and quickly. Owen worked efficiently, stripping off her snow-soaked dress and undergarments with clinical detachment, wrapping her in blankets he'd warmed by the fire. He removed her ice-encrusted shoes to find her feet white and waxy, early frostbite. He filled a basin with lukewarm water, not hot. That would be dangerous, and began the careful process of restoring circulation to her extremities. As he worked, he studied her face. Young, perhaps 25, with delicate features and long chestnut hair now damp from melted snow. A nasty bruise was forming on one cheek, and her lip was split, injuries too fresh to have been caused by her fall on his doorstep. "What happened to you?" he murmured, though he had his suspicions. 7 years as the owner of the Double E Ranch had acquainted him with most families in and around Bonanza. He didn't recognize this woman, but that wasn't unusual. Miners came and went with the fortunes of the local silver veins, bringing wives and families who often kept to themselves. After what seemed like hours of careful attention, color began returning to her cheeks. Her breathing deepened, and occasionally her eyelids fluttered, though she didn't fully wake. Owen continued his vigil, adding wood to the fire, checking her pulse, spooning broth between her lips when she seemed conscious enough to swallow. Dawn was breaking, the storm still howling outside when she finally opened her eyes deep brown, like rich coffee, clouded with confusion and fear. "Easy now," Owen said softly, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. "You're safe. My name's Owen Everett. You collapsed on my doorstep last night, nearly frozen through." The woman's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the rustic but comfortable surroundings, the solid log walls hung with a few paintings and a rifle, the sturdy furniture, the kitchen area with copper pots hanging above a wood stove. "Where?" she began, her voice a raspy whisper. "My ranch, the Double E," Owen explained. "About 3 miles east of Bonanza proper. Can you tell me your name, madam?" She licked her cracked lips, wincing at the pain from the split. "Zara," she managed. "Zara Rowley." Owen nodded, recognition dawning. Zachariah Rowley's wife, the miner. Fear flashed across her face at the mention of her husband's name, confirming Owen's suspicions about the source of her injuries. "Yes," she whispered. "Please, I need to." She tried to sit up but immediately swayed, her weakness evident. Owen gently eased her back down. "You need to rest," he said firmly. "That storm nearly killed you, and you're not out of danger yet. Your feet suffered some frostbite, though I think we caught it in time to avoid permanent damage." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as the memories of the previous night came flooding back. "He put me out," she whispered, the betrayal raw in her voice. "In the storm. He bolted the door." Owen's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. "I figured as much. No one willingly walks in a blizzard dressed as you were." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Mrs. Rowley, I don't mean to pry, but those bruises weren't from the cold." Zara looked away, her hand unconsciously touching her swollen cheek. "It was the whiskey talking," she said automatically, as if by rote. "He's been out of work for weeks. The mine closed its new shaft after a collapse. He's not himself when he drinks." Owen had heard such excuses before from his own mother years ago. He didn't push. Instead, he rose and moved to the stove. "You need food. I've got venison stew that's been simmering since yesterday. Think you can manage some?" The mention of food brought a different kind of pain to Zara's face. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Some cornbread." Owen ladled thick stew into a bowl and returned to her side, helping her sit up enough to eat. She took the spoon with trembling fingers, but her hand shook so badly that most of the stew spilled back into the bowl. "Here," Owen said, gently taking the spoon from her. "Let me." Under different circumstances, Zara might have been mortified at being fed like a child by a stranger. But hunger and exhaustion overrode pride, and she accepted each spoonful gratefully. Owen was patient, his weathered face kind as he waited for her to chew and swallow before offering the next bite. As strength gradually returned to her limbs, Zara became increasingly aware of her situation. She was in a strange man's cabin, wearing only blankets, miles from town in the middle of a blizzard. "My clothes," she said suddenly, looking around in alarm. "Drying by the stove," Owen replied, setting aside the empty bowl. "They were soaked through. I've got a shirt and some trousers you can borrow until yours are ready if you'd prefer to be dressed." Zara's cheeks flushed. "You undressed me." Owen met her gaze steadily. "I did what was necessary to save your life, madam, nothing more. You were dying of cold, and wet clothing would only have made it worse." After a moment, Zara nodded, accepting the practical truth of his words. "Thank you for saving me. I don't know how I found your cabin. I thought I was heading to town." "Lucky for you, you went the wrong way," Owen said. "Town's farther than my place from your cabin. You wouldn't have made it." The blunt assessment sent a chill through Zara that had nothing to do with the lingering cold in her bones. She had come so close to death. "Can you help me to town when the storm passes?" she asked, her voice small. "There's a boarding house. Perhaps Mrs. Peterson will let me work for a room until I can. Until she could what? Zara had no family in Colorado, no savings of her own. Her parents were back in Pennsylvania, and she hadn't spoken to them since she'd run off to marry Zachariah against their wishes 3 years ago. Too proud to admit they'd been right about him, she'd stopped writing when the letters grew too full of lies about her happiness. The storm won't pass for at least another day, according to my aching knee, Owen said, tapping the joint in question. Old war wound never fails as a weather predictor, and when it does clear, the trails will be impassable for a few days more. I'm afraid you're stuck here for the time being. Zara's face fell. What must he think of her? A burden, an unwanted guest, a foolish woman who couldn't even keep her husband from throwing her out. I can work, she offered quickly. Cook, clean, mend, I won't be a burden. Owen shook his head. You'll rest, doctor's orders. You're a doctor. A small smile touched his lips. No, madam, but I served as a medic in the war, and I've patched up enough cowboys and frostbitten travelers to know you need rest more than anything. There'll be plenty of time to sort everything out once you're stronger. Zara wanted to protest, to insist she earn her keep, but exhaustion was already pulling at her again. The warm food in her belly and the heat from the fire were lulling her back towards sleep. Thank you, Mr. Everett, she murmured as her eyelids grew heavy. Owen, he corrected gently. Just Owen. The last thing Zara saw before sleep claimed her was Owen's face, strong-jawed and weathered from sun and wind, with kind eyes the color of summer sky as he carefully tucked the blankets more securely around her shoulders. For 3 days, the blizzard raged without ceasing. During that time, Zara drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting to recover from the brutal cold and the strain of her journey through the storm. Owen remained a constant presence, tending to her needs with quiet efficiency. When she was awake, he helped her sip broth or tea, changed the warm compresses on her frostbitten feet, and occasionally read aloud from one of the surprisingly numerous books that lined a shelf near his bed. On the morning of the 4th day, Zara woke to silence. The howling wind that had been the backdrop to her recovery had finally ceased. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's windows, casting golden rectangles on the plank floor. She sat up slowly, testing her strength. The cabin was empty, but a fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth, and a pot of something aromatic simmered on the stove. Zara was dressed now in one of Owen's flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled up multiple times, and a pair of trousers cinched tight with a piece of rope. Her own clothing, cleaned and mended, lay folded on a chair nearby, but Owen had insisted the thicker garments would keep her warmer. Testing her weight on her tender feet, Zara stood carefully. The frostbite had been mild enough that she hadn't lost any tissue, but walking was still painful. She made her way slowly to the window and looked out at a world transformed. Snow covered everything in a pristine blanket at least 3 feet deep. The sun reflected off it with blinding brightness, the sky above an impossible blue. In the distance, she could see mountains rising majestically, their slopes white against the sky. Closer, a barn and corral emerged from the snow, and beyond them, what appeared to be grazing land, now buried under the white expanse. The door opened behind her, and Zara turned to see Owen stamping snow from his boots. He carried an armful of firewood, his cheeks ruddy from the cold, his breath forming clouds in the air that followed him inside. "You're up," he said, looking pleased. "And just in time. I've got the path to the barn cleared and the horses are fed. Thought I might make us some breakfast that isn't stew for a change." Zara smiled, surprised at how genuine it felt. "I'd be happy to help. I'm feeling much stronger today." Owen studied her for a moment, his gaze assessing but not invasive. "Your color's better," he agreed. "But don't push too hard. Those feet need time to fully heal. As they worked side by side preparing a simple breakfast of flapjacks and bacon, Zara found herself studying Owen surreptitiously. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of a lifetime of physical labor. His hair, a rich brown with hints of copper where the sunlight caught it, was a bit too long, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. A short beard, neatly trimmed, covered a strong jaw. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, in his own space. "How long have you lived here?" she asked as they sat down to eat. Owen swallowed a bite of flapjack before answering. "Bought this land 7 years ago, right after the war. It was nothing but wilderness then. Built the cabin myself that first summer, added the barn the next year. Been adding bits and pieces ever since. All alone." The question slipped out before Zara could consider how personal it was. A shadow crossed Owen's face. "My brother Daniel was with me at first. We had plans to build the biggest cattle ranch in the county, but he took sick the second winter, pneumonia. Doctor couldn't get through the snow in time." He paused, his gaze distant. "After that, it was just me. Hired hands come and go with the seasons, but they bunk in the barn or the bunkhouse we built 2 summers ago." "I'm sorry about your brother," Zara said softly. Owen nodded his acknowledgement. "What about you? How did you end up in Bonanza?" Zara looked down at her plate. "I met Zachariah in Philadelphia. He was passing through, full of stories about silver strikes and fortunes to be made in Colorado. I was 20, working as a seamstress, living with parents who had my whole life planned out. Marriage to the son of my father's business partner, a life of social obligations and careful propriety." She poked at a piece of bacon. "Zachariah was like no one I'd ever met. Wild, free, full of dreams. When he asked me to come west with him, to marry him and build a life in this new place, it seemed like an adventure. My parents forbade it, of course, so we eloped. And the adventure wasn't what you expected," Owen guessed. Zara gave a humorless laugh. "The silver mine where Zachariah found work kept closing and reopening as veins played out or new ones were discovered. The cabin he built was drafty and small. Winters were harder than I'd imagined possible, and Zachariah—" She trailed off. "Changed," Owen supplied. "Or perhaps the man I thought I married never really existed," Zara said quietly. "The drinking started the first winter. The anger came with it. By the second year, I was making excuses for the bruises when I went into town." Owen's hand tightened on his fork. "No man has the right to treat a woman that way, no matter the circumstances." Zara looked up, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. "You sound like you speak from experience." It was Owen's turn to look away. "My father was a drinker. Used his fists more often than his words, especially on my mother. Daniel and I were too young to stop it until we weren't. The day we stood up to him was the day he walked out, never saw him again. And your mother died while Daniel and I were away fighting. Neighbor wrote to tell us. Said she just seemed to give up after years of hardship." Owen's voice was matter-of-fact, but Zara sensed the old pain beneath the words. They ate in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Zara set down her fork and asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens now? When will the trail to town be passable?" Owen considered. "Another day or 2 for the main trail if the sun keeps shining. But Mrs. Rowley—" "Zara," she corrected him. "Please." "Zara," he acknowledged with a nod. "You need to think carefully about your next step if you go back to town. Zachariah will find me," she finished for him. "And after what he did, leaving me to die in that storm." She shuddered. "I can't go back to him, I won't." "Do you have family elsewhere who might take you in?" Zara thought of her parents in Philadelphia, the hurt and disappointment in their eyes when she'd announced her plans to marry Zachariah. "No one who would welcome me," she admitted, "but I can work. I'm skilled with a needle and I can cook and clean. Perhaps in Denver. Denver's a long journey from here, especially in winter," Owen interrupted. "And a woman traveling alone." He didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew the dangers. A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Owen spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "You could stay here. Until spring, at least. I've got the space, and truth be told, I could use the help around the place. My housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, only comes up from town once a week in good weather, and not at all in winter." Zara stared at him. "Stay here, alone with you, Mr. Everett, people would talk." A smile quirked one corner of Owen's mouth. "People always talk, especially in small towns like Bonanza, but I'm offering you a job, not anything improper. You'd have your own space. There's a small room off the kitchen that Mrs. Finch uses when weather keeps her overnight. And when the trail's clear, you can help me explain the situation to Reverend Collins. He's a reasonable man." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. The thought of having a safe place to stay, away from Zachariah's unpredictable rages, was almost too good to be true. But something held Zara back. "Zachariah wouldn't let me go so easily," she said slowly. "He'd see it as a matter of pride, of ownership. He'd come for me." Owen's expression hardened. "Let him try. This is my land, my home. No man threatens what's under my protection." The conviction in his voice gave Zara a strange, fluttering feeling in her chest. How long had it been since anyone had protected her, rather than being the thing she needed protection from? "I'll stay," she decided, the words bringing immediate relief. "Until spring, as your housekeeper, and I'll earn my keep, I promise." Owen's smile was warm as sunshine after a storm. "I don't doubt it for a moment." The days began to fall into a comfortable rhythm. As Zara's strength returned, she gradually took over more of the household duties, cooking, cleaning, mending Owen's work clothes that showed signs of bachelor patching. Her feet healed completely, though they remained sensitive to cold, requiring extra thick socks that she knitted from wool Owen had stored away. Owen, for his part, spent his days tending to the ranch's needs. The Double E was modest by some standards, 100 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and some chickens, but it required constant attention, especially in winter. He cleared paths through the snow, chopped endless firewood, checked fences that might have been damaged by the weight of ice and snow, and nursed along a pregnant mare who'd been bred too late in the season. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes reading quietly. Owen had an impressive collection of books for a rancher living on the frontier: classics, poetry, history, even some dime novels that made Zara laugh with their exaggerated depictions of Western life. "These writers have clearly never set foot west of the Mississippi," she commented one evening, holding up a particularly dramatic tale of Indian attacks and heroic cavalry rescues. Owen chuckled. "Truth rarely sells as well as fiction, I suppose. Though some of what happens out here is stranger than anything they could make up. Like a half-frozen woman appearing on your doorstep in the middle of a blizzard," Zara suggested with a smile. "Exactly like that," Owen agreed, his eyes lingering on her face a moment longer than necessary before returning to his own book. Such moments had been occurring with increasing frequency: gazes that held, hands that brushed when passing dishes at meals, conversations that seemed to carry meanings beyond the words themselves. Zara wasn't blind to what was happening. In the 6 weeks since the blizzard, she had come to know Owen Everett as a man of quiet strength, unexpected gentleness, and unwavering integrity. He treated her with a respect she'd almost forgotten she deserved. And if her heart beat a little faster when he smiled, if she found herself looking forward to their evenings together with an eagerness that went beyond simple companionship, well, that was a complication she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The snow was beginning to melt, patches of ground appearing like islands in the white sea when the visitor arrived. Zara was kneading bread dough when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking out the window, she saw a horse and rider coming up the now clear trail to the cabin. Owen, she called, wiping her hands on her apron. He had been in the barn all morning, working with the new foal that had been born the previous week. The rider drew closer, and Zara's blood turned to ice in her veins. The stocky build, the characteristic tilt of the head she would recognize Zachariah Rowley anywhere. For a wild moment, she considered hiding. But where? The cabin offered few places of concealment, and her footprints in the remaining snow would give her away immediately. Instead, she quickly wiped the flour from her hands and face, straightened her borrowed shirt and trousers, and steeled herself for the confrontation. Zachariah dismounted with the awkward movements of a man who rarely rode, tethering his horse to the hitching post before stomping up to the cabin door. His knock was more of a pounding, aggressive and demanding. Zara opened the door before he could knock again, determined to meet whatever was coming head-on. Zara. Zachariah's eyes widened momentarily before narrowing in suspicion. He looked her up and down, taking in the men's clothing, her loose hair, the confidence in her stance that hadn't been there when he'd last seen her. So the rumors are true. You've been hiding out here all this time, playing house with the rancher. I nearly died the night you threw me out, Zachariah, Zara replied, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. Mr. Everett saved my life, Zachariah snorted, and I'm sure he's been collecting payment in his own way. His gaze swept past her into the cabin. Where is he? I want to talk to the man who thinks he can steal another man's wife. No one stole me, Zara said firmly. I am not a possession. You're my wife, Zachariah snarled, stepping forward until he was crowding the doorway. And you're coming home now, get your things. Zara held her ground. No. The simple refusal seemed to catch Zachariah off guard. In their 3 years of marriage, she had never directly defied him, never outright refused a direct command. His face darkened with anger, his hand rising almost reflexively. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Rowley. Owen's voice came from behind Zachariah, calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. He stood a few paces away, a rifle held casually but expertly in his hands. Not aimed at Zachariah, but not pointed away either. Zachariah turned slowly. Everett, should have known you'd come slinking around. Enjoying my leavings, are you? Owen's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. Mrs. Rowley has been recuperating under my roof as my housekeeper, nothing more. The injuries she sustained the night you threw her out in a blizzard nearly killed her. What happens between a man and his wife is no business of yours, Zachariah spat. When that business includes attempted murder, it becomes everyone's concern, Owen countered. Sheriff Patterson would certainly take an interest. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Zachariah's face. It was a marital disagreement. I never meant for her to what? Freeze to death. Because that's what would have happened if she hadn't found my cabin, Owen cut him off. Now I think it's best if you leave. Mrs. Rowley has made her wishes clear. Zachariah's hand moved toward the gun on his hip. I'm not leaving without my wife. Owen's rifle came up smoothly, leveling at Zachariah's chest. Yes, you are, one way or another. The two men stared at each other, the tension crackling between them like summer lightning. Zara held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they both must hear it, Finally, Zachariah broke the standoff with a harsh laugh. "Keep her then. She's more trouble than she's worth anyway, but don't think this is over, Everett." He turned to Zara, his expression ugly. "And you. When you're done warming his bed and he tosses you aside, don't come crawling back to me." With that, he turned and stalked back to his horse, mounting awkwardly and wheeling the animal around. As he rode away, he shouted over his shoulder, "You'll regret this, both of you." Only when he disappeared around the bend in the trail did Zara release the breath she'd been holding. Her knees threatened to give way beneath her, and she clutched the doorframe for support. Owen was at her side in an instant, one arm around her shoulders, guiding her to a chair. "Are you all right?" Zara nodded, though she didn't feel all right at all. Her hands were shaking and a cold sweat had broken out across her forehead. "He'll be back," she whispered. "With others, maybe, the miners. He has friends who SHH," Owen soothed, crouching beside her chair. "Let him bring whoever he wants. This is my land and you're under my protection. I meant what I said, Zara. He won't take you anywhere you don't want to go." She looked into his eyes, finding only sincerity and determination there. "Why are you doing this? Risking yourself, your reputation, your ranch for me. You barely know me." Owen was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know enough," he said finally. "I know you're brave and strong, even when you don't believe it yourself. I know you work hard and care deeply. I know you deserve better than what life has given you so far." He paused, something vulnerable crossing his features. "And I know that in these past weeks, this cabin has felt more like a home than it has since Daniel died. Because you're in it." The simple honesty of his words struck Zara speechless. Owen Everett wasn't a man who spoke his feelings easily or often. That he would reveal so much now, after the confrontation with Zachariah, told her more than any flowery declaration could have. "I don't want to be a burden to you," she said at last. "Or a danger." Owen shook his head. "You're neither. But Zara, you need to decide what you want, not what Zachariah wants or what I want or what anyone else thinks you should do. What do you want?" It was a question no one had asked her in a very long time. What did she want? The answer came with surprising clarity. "I want to stay here," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "With you. I want to see if what I'm feeling, what I think you're feeling too, is real. I want a chance to find out who I am when I'm not afraid all the time." Owen's smile was slow and warm, transforming his serious face. "Then that's what you'll have. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." As it turned out, Zachariah's threats were largely empty. 2 days after his visit, Sheriff Patterson rode out to the Double E, his weathered face grave as he dismounted. "Got reports of a disturbance out here," he said without preamble. "Rowley's in town telling anyone who'll listen that you stole his wife at gunpoint, Everett." Owen, who had been splitting logs in the yard, set down his axe. "That's not how it happened, Sheriff. Mrs. Rowley nearly died in that blizzard 6 weeks back because her husband threw her out of their cabin with no coat, no boots, nothing but the dress she was wearing. She found her way here, half frozen. I saved her life. She's been recovering since, working as my housekeeper." Patterson's shrewd eyes moved to Zara, who had come out of the cabin at the sound of voices. "That true, madam?" Zara stepped forward, meeting the lawman's gaze directly. "Every word, Sheriff. I have no wish to return to my husband. His treatment of me has been less than Christian." The sheriff nodded slowly. "I figured as much. Rowley's got a reputation in town, especially when he's drinking. But, madam, he is your lawful husband." "In the eyes of the law." "In the eyes of the law," Owen interrupted. "Attempting to cause someone's death is a crime, husband or not, and that's what he did when he put her out in that storm." Patterson considered this, chewing thoughtfully on his mustache. "Might be hard to prove intent." Could say he was just angry, didn't think it through. Then let me put it this way, Sheriff, Zara said, straightening her shoulders. I will not return to that man. If you try to force me, I will simply leave again at the first opportunity, and next time I'll go farther than the double E. The determination in her voice seemed to impress Patterson. Nobody's forcing anyone to do anything, Mrs. Rowley, just trying to understand the situation. He glanced between Owen and Zara. You two aiming to make this arrangement permanent? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Owen looked at Zara, letting her take the lead. I intend to seek a divorce, Zara said firmly. On grounds of cruelty. I understand it won't be easy, but I'm prepared for that fight. Patterson nodded. Judge Wilson's circuit rides through here in about a month. He's heard cases like yours before. Can't promise how he'll rule, but he's a fair man. In the meantime, he paused, looking uncomfortable. Might be best if you weren't living alone with Mr. Everett here. For propriety's sake, people talk. I understand, Sheriff, Zara said. Would it satisfy propriety if I moved to the bunkhouse where the hands stay in summer? It's empty now and visible from the main house. The sheriff considered, then nodded. That'd help, I reckon. Show you're making an effort at least. He turned to Owen. As for Rowley, I'll have a word with him. Warn him off causing any more trouble. But keep that rifle handy just in case. Some men don't take kindly to being left. After the sheriff departed, Zara and Owen stood together in the yard, watching his horse disappear down the trail. I'll move my things to the bunkhouse right away, Zara said. It's a good solution for now. Owen looked troubled. It's drafty out there, cold at night still. I've lived in worse, Zara reminded him with a small smile. Besides, it's only until the judge comes through. By then. She let the sentence hang unfinished, but they both knew what she meant. By then, they would have a better idea of whether their future lay together or apart. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity. Spring arrived in earnest, melting the last of the snow and bringing new life to the ranch. Calves were born, requiring constant attention. The garden needed planting, fences mending, 100 tasks that had been put off during the harsh winter months. Zara moved into the bunkhouse as promised, though she spent her days in the main cabin, cooking and cleaning as before. The arrangement was difficult in some ways. She missed their evening conversations by the fire, and the bunkhouse was indeed cold, but it gave them both time to consider what they truly wanted. For Zara, the decision had already been made in her heart. Living with Owen, even in this circumscribed way, had shown her what a partnership based on mutual respect could be. He valued her opinions, appreciated her work, never raised his voice in anger. When their hands brushed as she passed him coffee in the morning, or when their eyes met across the table at mealtimes, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. But she needed to be sure Owen felt the same. That his protection wasn't merely duty or chivalry, that his kind words weren't simply comfort for someone who had been through an ordeal. And more importantly, she needed to be free, truly free, before she could offer her heart again. The day Judge Wilson arrived in Bonanza, Zara dressed with particular care in her own clothes, now altered to fit her properly after weeks of wearing Owen's oversized garments. She had agonized over whether to ask Owen to accompany her to town, but ultimately decided to make the journey alone. This was her battle to fight, her freedom to win. The courtroom, such as it was, had been set up in the town hall, a grand name for what was essentially a large cabin that served as meeting place, church, and social hall for Bonanza's residents. Judge Wilson, a portly man with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened carefully as Zara presented her case. She spoke clearly and without embellishment about Zachariah's drinking, his violent outbursts, and finally, the night he had put her out in the blizzard. Zachariah, surprisingly, did not contest the divorce. Perhaps the sheriff's words had made an impression, or perhaps he had simply moved on to other interests. He sat sullenly at the back of the room, rising only when directly addressed by the judge and offering no defense beyond a muttered, "If she wants to go, let her go." "And the matter of property?" Judge Wilson asked, looking between them. "I want nothing from him," Zara said firmly. "Only my freedom." The judge nodded, making a note in his ledger. "Very well. Based on the evidence presented and the testimony of Sheriff Patterson regarding Mrs. Rowley's condition when found, I find sufficient grounds for dissolution of this marriage on the basis of cruel and inhuman treatment." He looked up, his gaze stern as it fixed on Zachariah. "Mr. Rowley, you are hereby ordered to have no further contact with the petitioner. Any violation of this order will result in your arrest. Do you understand?" Zachariah nodded sullenly. "I understand." "Then by the authority vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I declare this marriage dissolved." The judge's gavel came down with a decisive thwack. "Mrs. Rowley, you will revert to your maiden name or may choose another. Please inform the clerk of your decision for the official record." Zara stood, a sense of lightness filling her that had nothing to do with the spring day outside. "Zara Reed," she told the clerk. "My name is Zara Reed." She walked out of the town hall into the bright sunshine, her steps lighter than they had been in years. Free, she was free. No longer bound to Zachariah, no longer required to endure his rages and his fists. Free to choose her own path, to become whoever she wanted to be. And she knew exactly who that was. The ride back to the Double E seemed both interminable and too short. Zara had borrowed one of Owen's gentler mares for the journey, and the horse seemed to sense her rider's impatience, moving at a steady trot without urging. As the familiar outline of the ranch came into view, Zara's heart began to race. What if Owen wasn't there? What if, in the hours she'd been gone, he'd reconsidered whatever had been growing between them? But as she approached, she saw him waiting by the corral, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. He'd been watching for her then. The thought warmed her more than the spring sunshine. Owen stepped forward to help her dismount, his hand strong and sure on her waist. "How did it go?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. "It's done," Zara said, unable to keep the smile from her voice. "I'm free, Owen, truly free." His answering smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I never doubted it for a moment. You were magnificent that day with the sheriff. I knew Judge Wilson would see the truth." They stood there, the horse forgotten between them, something unspoken hanging in the air. Finally, Zara gathered her courage. "I've been thinking," she began, "about what happens next. Now that the divorce is final, there's no need for me to stay in the bunkhouse, for propriety's sake." Owen's expression grew guarded. "You're welcome to move back into the cabin, of course, Mrs. Finch's room is still yours for as long as you want it." Zara took a deep breath. "And what if I want something else, something more?" Owen went very still, his eyes never leaving hers. "What are you saying, Zara?" "I'm saying that these past months with you have shown me what it means to be respected, to be valued, to be cherished." The word came out softer than she intended, almost a whisper. "I'm saying that I don't want to be your housekeeper anymore, Owen. I want to be your partner. Your wife, if you'll have me." For a moment, Owen said nothing, and Zara's heart seemed to stop beating. Had she misread everything? Had she been so desperate for kindness that she'd mistaken basic decency for something deeper? Then Owen's hands were cupping her face, his touch gentle as if she were made of the finest porcelain. "Zara Reid," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been falling in love with you since the moment you opened your eyes by my hearth." I didn't say anything because I wanted you to be sure, to be free to choose without feeling obligated or rushed." "I am sure," Zara whispered, her hands coming up to rest on his wrists. "I choose you, Owen Everett, not out of gratitude or obligation, but because you've shown me what love should be." Owen's smile was brighter than she'd ever seen it as he lowered his head to hers. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they parted, Zara felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, as if all the broken pieces of her past had been gathered up and made into something new and whole. "I love you, Zara Reed," Owen said, his forehead resting against hers. "And I promise you'll never know fear in this home again." "I know," she replied simply. "That's why I love you too." The wedding took place 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony in the Bonanza Church with Reverend Collins officiating. Mrs. Finch, who had taken an immediate liking to Zara upon their first meeting, stood as her witness. Several of Owen's neighboring ranchers and their wives attended, along with Sheriff Patterson, who offered gruff congratulations and a warning that Zachariah had left town, reportedly heading to the new Silver Strikes in Leadville. Their wedding night was everything Zara had never known. Intimacy could be tender, passionate, filled with whispered words of love and reverence. In Owen's arms, she discovered that physical love could be a joy rather than a duty or an ordeal to be endured. They learned each other slowly, with patience and wonder, building a connection that went far beyond the physical. As spring gave way to summer, and summer to fall, the double E flourished under their joint care. Zara's garden yielded abundant vegetables, and her skill with needlework brought in extra income when she began taking commissions for fine embroidery and mending from the wealthier ladies in Bonanza. Owen expanded the herd, adding 20 head of prime cattle purchased with the proceeds from that spring's calf sale. They made improvements to the cabin as well, adding a proper bedroom with a door that could be closed for privacy, a luxury Zara had never experienced in her previous marriage. Owen built shelves for her growing collection of books, ordered from Denver and eagerly awaited with each mail delivery. Winter came again, but this time, when the snow fell, Zara watched it from the warmth of their home with contentment rather than dread. The cold brought memories of coarse nightmares sometimes, of stumbling through a white void, freezing and alone. But Owen was always there when she woke, his arms steady around her, his voice a comforting rumble in the darkness. "I've got you," he would murmur. "You're safe. You'll always be safe with me." And she believed him, more deeply with each passing day. It was during that winter that Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. The news came as a joyful surprise to both of them. Owen's reaction, a look of such wonder and love that it brought tears to Zara's eyes, confirmed what she already knew. This child would be born into love, would grow up surrounded by it, would never know the fear and pain that had marked her own marriage to Zachariah. "A baby," Owen kept saying, his hand gentle on the slight curve of her belly. "Our baby." "Our future," Zara corrected softly, covering his hand with her own. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. By spring, when the last snow melted and the first wildflowers appeared on the hillsides, Zara's condition was evident to all who saw her. Mrs. Finch clucked and fussed, bringing traditional remedies for morning sickness and swollen ankles. The ranchers' wives who had become Zara's friends offered advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Owen hovered protectively, insisting on taking over the heavier household chores despite Zara's protests that she was pregnant, not invalid. Their son was born on a warm June evening with Mrs. Finch serving as midwife and Owen pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the old woman finally took pity on him and allowed him in to meet his child. "A healthy boy," Mrs. Finch announced proudly, placing the swaddled infant in Zara's arms. "Strong lungs, all his fingers and toes. He'll be tall like his father, I reckon." Owen approached the bed almost reverently, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Zara's arms. When he looked at her, his face was wet with unashamed tears. "You did it," he whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "You're amazing." Zara smiled tiredly, her own eyes damp. "We did it. He's perfect, isn't he?" "Perfect," Owen agreed, gently touching the baby's cheek with one finger. "What shall we call him?" They had discussed names during the long winter evenings, but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at her son's face so new yet somehow familiar, Zara knew. "Daniel," she said softly, "after your brother. Daniel Owen Everett." Owen's intake of breath was sharp, his eyes widening. "You're sure? You don't want to name him after your father or—" "I'm sure," Zara said firmly. "Your brother helped build this ranch, this home. He should be remembered here." Owen gathered her and the baby carefully in his arms, mindful of her soreness from the birth. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "Both of you more than I ever thought possible." Young Daniel thrived, growing from a tiny newborn to a robust baby with remarkable speed. He had Owen's blue eyes, and, as Mrs. Finch had predicted, promised to have his father's height as well. His temperament, however, was all his own, curious, determined, and possessed of a sunny disposition that delighted everyone who met him. Life on the Double E settled into a new rhythm, shaped by the needs and joys of raising a child. Owen expanded the ranch's operations, hiring 2 permanent hands to help with the increasing herd. Zara's garden experiments proved successful enough that they began selling excess produce in town, adding another modest income stream to the ranch's finances. When Daniel was 2, the town council approached Owen about serving as a member. "We need level heads and steady hands," the mayor explained. "Men who understand the land and the people who work it." Owen accepted the position with Zara's full support. "You'll be good at it," she told him confidently. "You see both sides of every issue and you've always been fair." His involvement in town affairs brought a wider circle of friends into their lives. The Everett home became known for its hospitality, with Zara hosting informal gatherings where ranchers and townspeople alike felt welcome. Even Mrs. Patterson, the sheriff's wife and acknowledged arbiter of Bonanza society, pronounced Zara a real lady, despite her unconventional start here. The comment made Zara smile when she heard it. If only Mrs. Patterson knew how little such approval mattered to her now. She had found her place, her purpose, her family. The opinions of others were simply background noise to the rich melody of the life she and Owen had built together. One crisp autumn day, when Daniel was almost 3, a letter arrived that threw that peaceful existence into momentary disarray. It was from Philadelphia, addressed to Zara in an elegant hand she recognized immediately her mother's. Zara stared at the envelope for a long time before finally opening it with trembling fingers. Inside was a lengthy letter, beginning with recriminations but gradually shifting to expressions of concern and, ultimately, a tentative olive branch. Her father had died the previous winter, her mother wrote. The business had been sold. She was alone now and wondering about the daughter she hadn't heard from in so many years. "I was wrong," the letter concluded. "Your father and I both were. We should have supported your choices, not condemned them. I understand if you cannot forgive us, but please know that my door is always open should you wish to write or visit." Zara read the letter twice before handing it silently to Owen, who had watched her changing expressions with concern. "What will you do?" he asked after reading it himself. Zara looked out the window to where Daniel was playing in the yard, his dark hair catching the sunlight as he chased a butterfly with the serious concentration only a child can bring to such a task. "I'll write to her," she decided. "Tell her about our life here, about Daniel. Invite her to visit if she wishes." She turned back to Owen. "The past is past. I've learned that better than most, I think, and she's his only grandmother." Owen nodded, drawing her into his arms. "You're a remarkable woman, Zara Everett. More forgiving than most would be in your place." Zara leaned into his embrace, watching their son through the window. "Life is too short for grudges. And look what letting go of the past brought me, you, Daniel, this home. I want her to see that I'm happy, truly happy. Perhaps then she can find some peace too." The correspondence with her mother became regular after that, and the following summer brought a visit that was initially awkward but gradually warmed as Alina Reed came to know her daughter as an adult, an equal, rather than the rebellious girl who had run off with a silver miner. She doted on Daniel, bringing him gifts from Philadelphia that fascinated the boy who had never seen such exotic items. "You've built a good life here," Alina admitted to Zara one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Owen and Daniel chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Better than I imagined possible in such a wild place." Zara smiled, her hand resting automatically on the slight swell of her belly where their second child was just beginning to show. "It wasn't always easy, but yes, it's a good life, the best I could have hoped for." When the time came for Alina to return east, she left with promises to visit again, perhaps for an extended stay when the new baby arrived in the winter. Zara was surprised to find herself looking forward to it. "Full circle," Owen commented that night as they prepared for bed. "From being thrown out in a blizzard to this, a thriving ranch, a family, even reconciliation with your mother. You've come a long way, Mrs. Everett." Zara moved into his arms, resting her head against his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "We've come a long way together," she corrected gently, "and we have so much further still to go." Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, delicate flakes drifting past the window. But inside, all was warmth and light, and love, a stark contrast to that desperate night 4 years earlier, when a frozen woman had collapsed on a stranger's doorstep. Not strangers now, but partners, lovers, parents, 2 lives that had intersected by chance and choice, creating something neither could have achieved alone. As Owen's arms tightened around her, Zara offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the storm that had nearly killed her, but had instead led her to this man, this life, this love. Their daughter was born on a cold January morning in 1883, a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair and her mother's brown eyes. They named her Hope, for she represented everything they had found in each other and built together. As spring returned once more to the mountains around Bonanza, bringing new calves, fresh green grass, and wildflowers to the hillsides, the Double E Ranch stood as a testament to what could grow from the harshest beginnings. The cabin that had once sheltered a desperate woman from a killing storm was now the heart of a home filled with laughter, love, and the promise of many years to come. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work done, Owen and Zara would often sit together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Sometimes they spoke of the future plans for the ranch, dreams for their children. Sometimes they remembered the past, how far they had come, how much they had overcome. But always, always they held hands, their fingers intertwined in that simple, profound gesture that said more than words ever could. "I choose you, today and all my tomorrows, through whatever storms may come." Together,